Have you ever seen an unidentified flying object? The city of Nelson is very lucky this week to have as guests 3 important women in the UFO field. We have Aileen Edwards, who founded the UFO Contact Center International from Seattle. Her daughter, Lozanna Elwood, is from New York City, who's an associate director there. And Shirle Klein-Carsh is here from Surrey, BC, and she is the associate director of the Canadian branch of the UFO Contact Center International. Good evening, my name is Ephrem Holgate, and welcome to The New Age in You. And I'd like to welcome everybody this evening to our program. And Aileen, I'd like to open with you as the director of the UFO Contact Center International. Could you tell us how you founded the organization?
Yes, well, in 1953 I had an experience of my own, and for 10 years I didn't know what that was. So during that time I searched everything. I just had no idea what I was looking for. So after 10 years I moved to Seattle, Washington from Oregon and met the director of the UFO Reporting Center. At that time, I heard about UFOs and knew what I was looking for. So I became a member of his board of directors, and that was called a Phenomenal Research Group, and later became NICAP. And I did all the publicity for him and did investigations. At that time, I found many people who'd been picked up by UFOs. At that time, the scientific organizations were not open to contact cases. These people were having a great deal of trauma because they didn't know what had happened to themselves because of a mental block that's placed at the time. So I found a great need for a place where these people could come together and find other people that had the same type of experiences. Through this means, then they knew that they were not mentally unbalanced or there wasn't something wrong with them. Because at the time they thought there was no one else with the same type of experience. So in 1978 we started having meetings, and then June the 4th, 1981 we incorporated into a nonprofit organization. So that's how we got started.
And Lozanna, I'd like you were at the meeting last night and you had a really interesting experience in New York City.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Yes, this happened on March 17th, just this past March. My fiance and I were on Spring Street and the West End Avenue, which is quite a clear view of the night sky. There's no tall skyscrapers in the area, and we had just turned onto Spring Street. We were heading out to dinner, and we saw this formation of lights that was just hanging in the sky, and I said to my boyfriend, I said, well, what is that? I mean, that's real unusual. What do you think that is? And he looked at it and immediately pulled the car over to the curb. We got out of the car, stood on the sidewalk, and we saw a formation of lights that was in a V. The center light was white, and off to either side of this center light were 3 pairs of lights that were orange and blue, very close together, and it was just motionless in the sky. And we thought, well, gee, if it was a blimp, at least you would be able to see, some kind of a reflection off of it. I don't hear any noise. I don't think it's a plane. And just about the time we thought, I wish it would come in a little closer so we could see what it was, it started moving in our direction. Now, at that point, I got hairs up the back of my neck, and I thought, gee, this is really strange. Just as soon as we wanted to see it a little closer, it started coming in our direction. Well, it came towards us until it was approximately, I would say, maybe 2,000 feet from us, to where we could see it really quite close. And there was no other cars in the street, no background noise or anything. And as it came closer, we saw not only this V formation of lights, but we also saw a triangular or diamond pattern, rather, of lights behind it that were red. And we watched it in the sky for approximately, I'd say about a minute, before it slowly turned and started going back towards the north end of town. We were quite excited at the time, and we checked the newspapers in the morning and also checked radio stations and, if anybody had reported it to the police. And apparently there was quite a few people, actually several hundred people, who had also seen it in New York. And I was quite surprised because New York being the media capital of the world and 12 million people, you wouldn't expect to see UFOs right over downtown Manhattan. But we certainly did, and that just affirmed in my mind that the eastern seaboard is still quite active with UFOs. And I might like to also mention that there was a book about this that came out onto the newsstand quite recently that depicted this very same craft that was over the Putnam County and Westchester County area approximately 4 years ago, that was seen over the Taconic Parkway by several thousand people. And that has been well documented by investigator Phil Imbrogno, who writes it up in his book Night Siege.
Well, I think that's what's really important about Aileen and you and Shirle, having a center and a contact group where people can actually come forward, and there's going to be a lot more people getting a hold of you, for example, and feeling a lot freer to be able to discuss their sightings and that. Shirle, I'd like to ask you how you got involved, and how did you meet Aileen and get involved with the UFO Contact Center?
That really is quite interesting. Since my contact, I sort of decided, well, I guess either the world or I wasn't ready, whatever. And it took about a good 11, 12 years. And I went to a meeting where a lady was showing some photographs and a movie of spacecrafts. And they were so intriguing. And as I watched those films and I looked at the lady that was taking these films, something triggered in me. And I said to myself, it's time, it's time. So I walked over to a gentleman, and his name was Graham Conway at the time, still is. And I said to him, I have something to show you. I meanwhile took something out of my purse, and I had some strange writing, or alien writing, and I showed it to him. I think he sort of looked at me, looked at the writing, and not only became excited, but I think he became a little bit pale as well. And he said, I would like to see what you've got. I said, well, set up an appointment or when you can come. I said, I'll come, if it wasn't so late, I'll come tonight. And we made up an appointment to come the next day. I, meanwhile, went and took the various things that I was given out of hiding, and I showed it to him. He had another gentleman with him, also an investigator from South Africa. And they came around 7 o'clock and didn't leave till about 2 in the morning. I suddenly felt that after keeping it hidden for so long, I felt a certain sense of relievement to actually display and give my story and show what I did receive. Because as I said before, being an artist, and every time I would tell somebody something, they would sort of make jest of what I was saying. Well, she's an artist, her imagination, and they just sort of didn't take me seriously. Mm-hmm. Well, Graham Conway wrote to Aileen Edwards, who at that time lived down in Arizona. And the next thing I knew, I received a letter from Aileen. I thought, first of all, that, gee, where did she hear from me? And then she wrote, later on, Graham wrote to me, called me up and told me that Aileen writes you. I was really very excited, and by her letter, I felt that she was kind, and she had the awareness. So I sort of felt a trust in her, and I sent her a copy of 4 of the plates that I was given. And she wrote me back right away, there's 4 more. Please send the other 4. Well, I sent them. And that's how I was in contact with Aileen. And I'll tell you one thing, she's one great lady.
Sure is. Mm-hmm. I'd like to, you had a meeting every year, it's an international meeting called a JORPA. Could you tell us about that, Aileen?
Yes, that started in 1982 at La Pine, Oregon. We've had them in various places, but the first one was 1982. And the JORPA is an alien word that was given to Dr. Greta Woodrue in New York through her contact. It was given to her in a group of words so that she would recognize other people that were contacted by the same extraterrestrials. And I thought that would be a good word because it meant cosmic gathering, which is kind of hokey, but we wanted something that would stick in people's minds, and that's just what it's done. And it's become a very special event for all of us. People come from all over the world to the JORPA. We always give a trophy for the one who comes the furthest. And year before last, a man from South Africa won. a man from Denmark, one from Japan. So the contacts come together. We don't usually advertise it in newspapers or any place because the contacts do not want to relate their story if they think they're going to be sensationalized. So we keep it on a low key.
Could you share with us the experience that everybody had at the Jorpa? Was it last year?
Oh, last year. I'll let Shirle do that.
Okay, Shirley?
As a matter of fact, there were some people out in the field. It was about 10 o'clock at night. It was a beautiful night. And I was sort of in bed with, we were in bed sleeping, and I was awakened, and I had the feeling to go out of doors. And I went out of doors, but during the time there was a little fox, and I couldn't believe that a fox that tame to walk over to us and sniffed us, and suddenly it triggered in my mind that something was going to happen. I didn't know what. And I kept saying, this can't be a fox, a wild fox coming over and just sniffing us. And then suddenly there were a few other people on the field. We were at the Jorpa at the time. And somebody was yelling, take a look at that, it's UFO. Well, we all start yelling UFO, spacecrafts. Everybody ran out in their 90s and running. And the most incredible thing was that you actually saw the various, as Aileen would see it, and other people would see it in different ways. They had sort of a sort of ribbon effect, but there were small scout ships lining up to spell the word I, and then they added another part to make L, and then it was a V that I saw, which they couldn't sort of make a U. So it's I love you. Well, I tell you something, that if anybody was a non-believer, there was certainly something wrong with them, because there just can't be, that everything is possible. And it was so joyous, it was the greatest thing possible to happen. As a matter of fact, the next day we called down to the Seattle airport to find out if they saw anything. They said they saw was a great big light.
Well, the UFO Reporting Center in Seattle had calls from that area of a big light in the sky.
That's all. But for us, it came out that I love you. Well,
we were all jumping up and
yeah,
down.
I just greatly overcome by it.
And there was another experience with the lake. Can you tell us that?
This was in Sanford, Arizona in 1983. We were having the Jorpa at Roper Lake State Park. And it's a very small lake. It's about 6 feet deep, and they use it to water the stock. It's a man-made lake. Well, a lady was talking about her experience, and all of a sudden someone shouted, "Look at the lake." The lake was going in a counterclockwise motion, and a swimmer had just jumped in there, and he jumped right out again. We didn't know why he jumped out, but he must have felt something, you know. And as the lake went around, there was a depression in the middle, and just like a water fountain bubbling, several of them in the middle, was bubbling up in the air, and a depressed area. I mean, how could a lake do this while it's swirling in a counterclockwise motion? And I understand the northern hemisphere, everything goes in a clockwise motion. Well, we took pictures, many pictures were taken, and all those pictures had a purple hue to them. We don't know what that was, but it was, again, another joyous occasion. It was very exciting to everyone. The poor lady was left standing there talking to herself.
Lozanna, Associate Director in New York City. Could you tell us some stories about the people that you've come in contact with there?
Well, there's quite a bit of activity back there in the form of seminars, and two of the most recent ones that I went to, one up in Brewster, which is up in the area where this craft has been seen for quite a number of years. They had several big-name speakers back there, one of which I don't know if you're familiar with, Betty Hill was there. and she was abducted back in 1961 with her husband Barney, and she told us about her ongoing experience with UFOs, how she goes up to this one part of New Hampshire where she says there's a window there where the beam ships come in on lights. They have certain times that they come in, and she will see a streak of light, which she showed pictures of it, where they will just actually come into our atmosphere on this beam of light. And she's got several other photos where they land on this one little valley. You can see like the lights down in the valley. Other people who spoke there was an astrophysicist, I think his name was Dr. David Menke, who supported his belief that UFOs are real with scientific data, and that was really quite mind-opening for me. There was another contact there named Mariana Shenfield, who had been blind since birth, and she had been abducted as a child, and after this abduction she started getting like x-rays, like signs and symbols and colors that she could tell, you know, when people were sick. She could see, like, by their aura, she had a feeling about them, and with these signs and symbols she got messages and different channeling of information. And they're going to be making a movie about her life called Colors in the Dark. It's produced by Patricia Sable. I don't know if it's out as yet, but I was really quite intrigued by her story. There was another one up in North Haven where Bud Hopkins also spoke and shared with us some of his research that he had been doing with people who had been abducted, and Kathy Davis' story that's in his book Intruders. He extrapolated on that a little bit, you know, so that we could get the full picture that he couldn't really put down in the book. There is an awful lot of conferences going on back there. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to attend all of them, but
Or the money.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, right.
they are quite expensive. But there are 2-day deals where you go and you stay in the hotel, and they, you know, have got this huge room set up with all these printed materials and books, and it's really how do I want to say, it's really educational for somebody who hasn't been exposed to that before, to see all these people come forward and basically tell the same story that has been happening to them, some people, their whole lives.
Yeah, really interesting. I'm finding, you know, last night attending the meeting here in Nelson was really interesting. And at the meeting you were speaking of Helen Charbonneau, your friend Helen Charbonneau, and I was wondering if you could tell us something about her.
I have to go back to Aileen on this because Aileen, since I did send her the plates, she allowed Helen Charbonneau, who was also contacted with plates, although she had to memorize hers, and I'm glad I didn't have to memorize mine. Well, Helen Charbonneau contacted me and said, I must speak to you, and she came up to Canada to see me. Well, her story is really unique. Not only is it documented, but getting to know the lady, she's an incredible lady. She's a scientist, has worked for NASA, and the various scientific things that she's accomplished, as she has said, was given to her by aliens. They cured her of cancer. She was always a sickly child and came from a very large family. And her mother really wanted her to be well because, as she always said, as Helen says, since you're not going to have good looks, you better be able to know how to fend for yourself. And she was very worried that she couldn't really walk. And she went to Quebec, where there's sort of a healing shrine, and really prayed. And it didn't happen right away, but she finally became cured. And she, had to go to a nunnery and to become a nun, which the nuns helped her, and at least she had a schooling, and where from there, actually, besides getting married and all that, the main thing about Helen Charbonneau is that how she was cured of cancer, and how one night she was living up in Powell River, and one night she heard her name being called Helen. And she got up and she went to take a look to see perhaps her son or the gentleman that was in business with her was calling her. And as she entered their rooms, they were both fast asleep. She went back to her room Helen, and the voice again, louder this time. Put your kimono on and get in your car and we'll tell you where to go. Well, she did just do that and passed a little town where she saw a lot of people that were there that she sort of knew, and came down to a sort of a valley, and the car actually drove itself. And suddenly there was sort of a beam of light and two aliens. I really don't like the word aliens. I say space people. Came down, and she in full view, and the door opened, and Helen stepped out and was put into a shaft of light where she was lifted up with the two space people into the spacecraft. And there was a slab, a medical slab table, where she was asked to disrobe and to go on the slab. And she did, and there was the various space people were around her, and she sort of sensed one of them, she didn't know why, but felt that was female. And she said to her, you know, you're very ill, and you have a friend by the name of John who asked us to help you, and that's why we're here. And she went to her drawer and took out a sort of one of these long, big vials, sort of had a upside down mushroom thing with some liquid in it, sort of some purple. Or before that, they sort of scanned her and to tell her all the various places that she was that she had cancerous. Although she knew she had cancer of the pancreas, but didn't know that she had cancer probably almost all parts of her whole body. And they put that vial in. She says, don't worry, it'll hurt a little bit, but anyway, the point is that they really did something for her, and they told her, don't take any medication for 3 days. You're going to really be in agony and pain, but don't take any medication. And that's exactly what she did. She was told it's time for her to leave, and they, again, down a shaft of light, and she went back into the car, and the car started, or how she never knew how it started, being down in sort of a grotto. And she got home and went to bed. In the morning, she told her son, wow, did I have a dream? You're not going to believe this. And told her son everything. And then her son walked out. He says, Mom, come here. I thought look at your car. I mean, look at all the mud, and look where it's moved in a different direction. That was fine. And one day, somehow the doctor sort of met her son and said, well, I'm sorry to hear about your mother. I guess she's dead. What do you mean dead? Well, she's had cancer. She certainly can't live, because we've certainly given her up that she will not live the year out. So when her son said, I'm sorry, she's well and happy, she went down from 160 pounds to 98 pounds. And by the time the doctor saw her, she was already up to 120 pounds. And when the doctor came, he couldn't believe her. He just couldn't believe it. And they started taking tests, and they found that she had sort of an antibody of the cancerous cells. And of course, as she said, she's been giving blood to help various other people. But she's had various accidents. I not only close calls, but accidents. How in the world this woman who's gone through so much and is still going through so much, but she just has a charmed life.
Aileen, you were going to share with us an interesting story.
Yes, I wanted to share this story. Lozanna was telling about this contact that was blind, and Shirle was talking about Helen's healing. There's been various medical things happen, but this case is a case that we're really concerned about, because this happens to a lot of contactees where the parents don't understand what's happened. This young man lives in South Carolina, and he was picked up by a UFO when he was 20 years old. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about the story. It's interesting. He was in his bed, and he heard this humming sound just coming through the walls. And he looked outside, and he saw this light. And over the house was a huge spacecraft hovering there. And all of a sudden he found himself out in the yard, and he didn't know how he got there. He had just his undershorts on, and he thought, I better get in the house before somebody sees me out here. So he went in the house, and he heard his mother and father talking in the kitchen. His father was going to go to work and weld. He was in the Navy at that time, but he was a welder in the Navy. So he went to his bedroom, and he was down there listening to them. Well, the moment that the spacecraft took off, there was this huge flash of light, and the mother and father both saw it. And the father said to the mother, go see if that lamp burned out. She said, no, it's not even plugged in. And he said, well, it must be heat lightning. Well, they just couldn't understand what it was. So he went off to work. Well, Mark went into his bedroom, and he felt like he was burning. So he went into the bathroom, and here he was, bright red. He had received some kind of a burn, perhaps from radiation. We don't know what from. So he went into his mother, and he said, look at me. And she said, what happened to you? And he says, I don't know. And so she said, you should have seen this flash of light just a minute ago. He said, well, Mother, I did, and it was a spacecraft. And I believe I was taken into it. And she said, oh, that can't be possible. And he said, well, look at me. You know, he was all burned. So she told the father, and the father took him to the military psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. And that was the closest one, was the army base. Even though the mother and father had seen the flash of light, and he had asked his mother to come see it before it left, which she did see it as it was leaving. And what happened then was really terrible. The military psychiatrist started tapping his pencil on the table, and he said, well, some things can't be explained, but you really need help. And he said, I want you to go to the mental asylum for a month's observation. And then he asked the mother and father if they had seen this. And the mother said, well, yes. And Mark told me that they acted like they were scared that they were going to be put in there with them. Mm. So they were getting very nervous about the whole thing. But they allowed him to be put into the mental asylum. He was put on a drug called Prolixin. And this drug, after extensive use, causes tardive dyskinesia. Mark is still on this drug. It has been 10 years. And he tried to run away from there twice. One time he ran away for 2 months, and they brought him back, they found him. Another time he went to Texas. His father sent military police after him, put him back in there. Well, he finally learned about the UFO Reporting Center by calling the police. And this was just recently. We started working with him last November. And then the UFO Reporting Center, they share the abduction cases with our organization. So they gave it to us, and I interviewed him over the phone. This young man is not mentally unbalanced in any way. And at this point, the Prolixin has caused him to chew continually. He cannot control his muscles. He sleeps 70% of the time. He is under a guardianship to his mother. And his mother is part of the problem, I believe. She's in a mental health organization in that state. And she asked, just recently after they took him off of this, he went to a new doctor to have him put back on it. We just can't imagine why. I have written to senators, to the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, to Jack Anderson, a well-known columnist in the United States, and to Bud Hopkins and Whitley Strieber. And I would like to say Whitley Strieber sent a lot of money to help Mark. He was so touched by his case. And so through his money, we were recommended by the ACLU to an agency to help handicapped people in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And they are working now with Mark to get him off of this Prolixin and under their guardianship so that he can return to a normal life. Well, this case is really close to all of our hearts. We first gathered money to bring him to Seattle just to get him away from there, but we decided that was the wrong way to go about it. And the only way we can go about it is through the legal system, so that he can have a normal life. But what I'd like to say is this isn't the first time this has happened to people that have had unusual UFO experiences. I remember one time we had one in Saskatchewan, and both the husband and wife had missing time. It affected her more because what happens through a contact is that the psychic awareness is opened up just dramatically all at once. And that is why the people think there's something wrong with themselves. They don't understand it. This girl was seeing colors around people, and she said so. They thought she was mentally unbalanced. So they were going to put her in a mental hospital the next day. This was a physical therapist in good condition. So she called and asked for help. Well, we talked to her parents, and the next day we called again. And her mother got on the phone. She's a married lady. The mother said, "Why do you people do this? It's none of your business." And she said, "I can't see why you're spending your money to do this." And we said, "Because we want to help the people. There's nothing wrong with them. They've just had an unusual experience." So this is some of the things that happen to contactees. This is why Shirle extends herself, why Lozanna extends herself, why we all do, to help these people. And the only way we found to help them is to bring them together in group sessions, and you should see what happens then. They talk about their experiences, and they find out they're the same as someone else's. And they say, "Oh, did that happen to you? That happened to me, and I thought I was crazy." I remember one time we had this man come to us. He'd been alone all his life, and he became an alcoholic. He couldn't handle this, and he came from a Russian Orthodox family back in Pennsylvania. It was really sad. When he came to us and he looked through our drawings of aliens, he saw the ones that had abducted him when he was 13 years old. He started crying and fell into my arms. And he said, "I thought I was the only one that had ever seen that. I thought I was crazy, and now I know I'm not." And he said, "You just cannot imagine how this makes me feel." And he couldn't imagine how that made me feel. Made me feel wonderful to be able to help him. But
what kind of experiences do happen to people? Like missing time would be one. How would someone, have a feeling of that? What would be expressed? What kind of information do you get?
Unusual fears, phobias about going down certain stretches of highway for no apparent reason, unusual marks that you wake up with on your body, scars that appear that you have no conscious recollection of how you got that scar. Sometimes, I don't know if you found this, but sometimes I've heard it that when people meet other people for the first time, they have an instant recognition of that person. Not ever having met them or been in the same hemisphere with them before, all of a sudden just knowing that you know that person. Recurring nightmares, recurring dreams that you wake up with that are so vivid and real that they don't seem like a dream.
Especially about aliens or UFOs. I mean, most people don't dream about those things. And if they know they've had the missing time and they have these dreams, we call them flashbacks. And the flashbacks tell them something about their subconscious is trying to relate to the conscious. Hey, something happened to me.
Yeah, or cry at no reason why, and having the highs and the lows, and just not even feeling to go to work, and really feel very kind of depressive.
Of course, the most important thing is seeing a UFO coming close to you, and then all of a sudden it's gone. We just about can tell that something else has taken place during that time. So we use regressive hypnosis to go back to the time when the UFO came close. And then we take it from that point. And usually that's what's been, that's what's taken place, is they've been picked up and examined. And total amnesia is set in. But we found that these people are programmed, you might say, to awaken at a certain time. If they remembered this all at once, they'd have a burnout. That's what we feel. It'd be too much for them. So in Mark's case, he remembered all of that on his own, which I thought was really astounding. But
Unusual.
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it was sad. He did remember it after what happened to him, but anyway, that's usually what happens.
And having a center is so important because they can call you. I don't know about Aileen, I'm sure her line is busy all the time, as mine is. And there's, at any time at night or morning or whatever, they call you and they have need of you, and we just go. We do the best we possibly can. That's why a center is very important. They can relate to the various people that Aileen says, but at least they can pour their hearts out, and they have
and realize
somebody
that
there
people have
that
similar-
will
Someone to talk
listen,
to.
someone to talk to, and will not say that, gee, what's wrong with you?
I would like to make one point very clear. We have no government affiliation in any way. We have no funding whatsoever.
No, that's right.
We all pay our own way. And we do little money raising things, but it's not very much. Like we put out our newspaper every month.
Oh yes, the newspaper is called The Missing Link.
Right. Graham Conway that she was talking about won our contest at the beginning to name the paper. Well, we feel like maybe the contacts, if we were put here on this planet, are the missing link. So he won, and since that time it's been a good title for it. But we put that out once a month. It's devoted to the people who have these experiences. They send in articles, and I write articles. And that's the only place I think that there's
That's
any
right.
paper like it.
That's right, with all
So
the information you can get is really that you can get from the missing link.
We're going to put at the end of the program on the computer screen. We'll come
Oh,
up
that
your
would be
address
great.
in Seattle that people could write if they'd like a
That'd
copy
be
of the
Oh,
Missing
that's
Link.
wonderful.
And then I've written this book too
Yes.
that you're holding on to.
Right.
That has Helen Charbonneau's whole case in it and pictures of her when she was young. Many fantastic things happened with her. But that is a book that covers everything since the beginning when I had my experience, which I didn't tell you what it was. But it covers the contact centers and how it all got started.
Would you like to share with us your story?
Okay. It was 1953 and I was 17 years old. I just got married. And we were traveling at midnight between Pendleton, Oregon and Stanfield, Oregon. And that area is all wheat fields. And there weren't any cars on the road. It was very quiet there, farm community. And all of a sudden, the whole sky lit up bright green. About the green in your shirt there, I believe. And we could see the farm over across the way, and we could see shadows of the wheat along the road. It was just as bright as the noonday sun, only it was bright green. And inside the car was bright green. I had been sleeping, and my husband woke me up. Wake up, he said. And he was just hysterical. He didn't know what it was. And I didn't know what it was either, because I'd never heard of a UFO. And of course, these small country towns, you don't hear too much about things like that. So we were trying to rationalize. Maybe Hanford had blown up. We didn't know what it was. So we went around a hill and it was gone. Well, the next day I looked in the papers. There was nothing at all about it. Well, after that, my life changed dramatically. I became very hungry for knowledge. I studied everything. I started with the Rosicrucians by mail. I thought maybe they'd have an answer. Well, that didn't last long. And then I studied yoga and Islam and spiritualism, fundamental religions, everything. Until I moved to Seattle, Washington, 1963. And I was at the Pacific Science Center in Seattle, and I heard Bob Gribble, who's the director of the UFO Reporting Center, speaking. And there was a man from the military. It was the pro and the con, and you know who got conned? The general public. But anyway, that just hit me. That was what had happened to myself, and that I had been in close proximity. So I was in politics at that time, working for Kennedy and all those, great ambitions to change the country. Well, I invited Bob Gribble to come speak at the ladies' luncheon. And that was the last time I ever went to the ladies group or anything to do with politics. And he asked me to be on his board of directors. From that time on, I was on the board of directors until we started our own organization.
Say in any average month, how many letters you receive from people who get
my
sightings?
I receive so much mail, it's really hard to keep up with. I would say a month, probably 100 letters a month. And I don't have to answer all of them. Some of them just want information, so I send them brochures and things like that. But lately, it's been pretty quiet. The UFO Reporting Center, like for the last 2 weeks, I don't think they've received over 6 calls. It's just been really quiet. So it goes in waves, you know. But we receive information, not just from them, but through all of our centers throughout the United States. We have 20 centers. And they send in cases. And it goes by word of mouth a lot. Just like last night at the meeting. There were so many people that had things happen or knew of things that had happened. And I might say that we went up to Nakusp, and then we found out my daughter was looking for property, that a UFO had hovered right over the lake by Nakusp. And also we heard about the Sasquatch report at Lemon Creek. I guess everybody around here knows about that. But it's just everywhere. It just hasn't been brought out in the open. And it's not demonic or anything like that. We haven't found it to be that way.
No, definitely not.
I think that a lot of it is, you know, we're conditioned to, and when you do see one, a lot of times people think that they're going crazy because we have this conditioning and that's been put into us that we're it, you know, this is all there is, we're Earth,
Yeah,
and
that's
I think that's a foolish thought myself. I think all possibilities.
I think that until a scientific community is able to say, hey, this is a real phenomena, let's start studying it and find out what it really is. Until we're able to come to that realization and affirm that it's really there, we're going to be in the dark. We're going to have to stay with grassroots organizations like the UFO CCI. And what came to my mind when my mother said she gets 100 letters a month, that's 1,200 letters a year. We figured out between the two of us that Bud Hopkins gets 1,400 letters a year. No, 14,000. 14,000 letters a year. Put the two together and all the different centers in the UFO CCI, and you've got a heck of a lot of people out there who are seeing these things, who've been contacted, and I feel that there's a real need today, right now, for everybody to open up their eyes and say, this is really happening, let's do something about it. Let's write to our congressman, let's get a hold of scientific people, let's do something about it. And if they're not going to do anything about it, it's up to us.
Right.
See, not only that, I've been getting a lot of mail from scientists. They are becoming aware, and they're trying to do something about it. And really, I'm really touched because at least something is happening. I really feel the momentum is being built up, and not only people being aware, but they want to know what it is and find out what it is. And they do realize that we are not alone on this planet. How could we ever be alone with the billions of stars out there?
It's not exactly something that the government wants everybody to know.
No,
you know.
Definitely not, because we'd have to change our complete structure, and I don't think they're ready for that.
I think it's unfolding anyway. I mean,
Oh,
you know.
it has to.
We're passing them
I think
up.
we
Yes,
are
right.
the weapon. Do you realize that? We are the force that is going to change society.
Well, we're making inroads every place we go.
Of course, definitely.
You travel extensively. You're off even next week to
Yeah, to Wyoming.
to Wyoming.
Before that, I'm going to Portland for a lecture down there. But we also work.
That's
Right.
right.
We have jobs too.
That's
So
right.
it takes all of our time, all of my waking
Oh,
time.
God.
Extra time goes into this. And
I know, and I have to devote some time to my art, being
Right.
I'm an artist.
Right.
God, with all the different shows and things.
Right.
So, you know, really.
So people, I did a survey for the New Age and You, the TV program here, and 17 people actually filled out the survey who'd had sightings locally, which I found very phenomenal. And I'm sure there's a lot more that once they realize that there's a group here that they can contact that we'll be hearing more from. But on an international level, there's a gentleman named Billy Meyer from Switzerland that I'd like you to speak to us about, Aileen.
Yes, Edward Billy Meyer is his name. He's a Swiss farmer. He has one arm. And he was contacted at the age of 5. And that's when it started. We found out with our own people it usually starts about that age. Throughout his life, he was contacted by people from the Pleiades. Many people don't know where that is. That's just what we call the Little Dipper. And you can see that in the night sky very plainly. For many years, he was contacted by a cosmonaut by the name of Samyase, and that started in 1975. She instructed him to take pictures every time that she came. He has taken over 800 pictures of these craft that we'll be showing you today. And there's been several books written on it. The investigation was done by Wendell Stevens, Lee and Britt Elders. And Lee and Britt Elders are Genesis 3. You can still get the first book has just been reprinted, and it's $50. You can send it for it to Genesis 3, box JJ, Munds Park, Arizona, and I don't have the zip code. Munds Park is M-U-N-D-S. And they have 3 videos on the case. One is called The Beam Ship, one is called The Metal, and the last one is called The Myers Chronicles. And it's about Billy and what happened to him. And it has a lot of pictures of the UFOs in it that he took, and some that other people took.
Does he travel around?
No, he doesn't. In fact, at this point, he has had 8 assassination attempts on his life. People do not want this information to be known. And so now he has become a real recluse. He used to have so many people just invade their farmhouse, just take over their lives, you know, that they had no privacy at all. And there are a group of them that bought this little farm, and they've been fixing it up, and they live there with Billy. Now, they used to go out and talk to people in their country about what happened. He has now recalled them all. They're not to talk about it, just stay to themselves. And the contacts, the last I heard, have been stopped. There were many Pleiadians living here on this planet. And in fact, there's a little town in Switzerland that's called La Pleiades. And a lot of people didn't know that. It was full of Pleiadians that have lived here for 2,000 years. And now most of those people have gone back. I think they sort of gave up on us, that we were just not getting with the program. The Pleiadians say that they are like our cousins, that their forefathers are our forefathers. Now that leads to a lot of speculation. And that they are 3,000 years ahead of us, and we could catch up in 300 years if we applied ourselves. But since a lot of them have gone back now, I'm wondering if they think we still can do that. However, Billy's case is the best in the world, in my estimation. Has the most clearest pictures, and by the way, the pictures, the still pictures, were taken with a 35mm camera. It's a Japanese made, that he's able to operate with one hand. The lens is stuck on infinity. You can't adjust it. And some of them are blurry where they're up closer, but they're still the most clear pictures. And then he uses also a movie camera that he can operate with one hand.
I understand that they've done computer testing and that with the pictures to make sure that they're all real. And
yes, there's been a lot of rumors go around that they were on strings. However, that is not true at all. I know all the investigators. I also know what happened to one of the investigators because of his openness about this case. A lot of governments did not want this information to get out. And one of the investigators was put in prison for 5 years on trumped up charges. I believe they were trumped up, and a lot of us do that are in this
Yes,
field.
that's true.
And he just now has been released. But it was very odd that even though he was in prison, he was able to write, I believe he's written 8 books. He had his typesetting machine in prison. It just didn't add up that, you know, this person was a bad person because he wasn't being punished if he could do all his writing and everything. So it's just a lot of controversy around the case, but because it is such a good case, they can't really dispute it. There's been metal analysis done on the metal samples by Marcel Vogel, who is, I believe, an IBM metallurgist, and he's really well known for crystals. And he did all the investigation on the metal samples given, and he put them in a safe. That was very unusual too. When he went back to get them, he was the only one with a combination. They were gone, but he'd already done the analysis. And one of these films is just on the metal.
Just
the metal that they use in these ships is a mixture of porcelain type material with a alloy of some type.
It's the fusion that's the most
yes,
important
we're not
thing,
able to do that at all. They just can't comprehend how it's done. But there's real close-ups of the metal in this film.
You think the world will, I mean, we have sent a man to the moon. We have the Voyager starship, you know, sending back pictures of Uranus. And so I find myself just boggled to think that people are so limited in their scope that they poo-poo and say no and this and that. I mean, when we have all of this evidence available to us,
Yeah,
you know, like, I mean, Lozanna seeing that along with how many other people that was in the article in New York City? Hundreds of people, you know, I mean, and so it's really time to wake up and say, look, you know, let's reevaluate
Let's
our
investigate
thought.
what this really is.
Right.
What's really sad about that case is that 10,000 people have seen that craft in Westchester County in New York. I mean, very good witnesses, but yet they're still saying, some investigators that have the place where they can say this to the public, they're saying they're small airplanes with lights on. And this is the information they give people when they call in. And I have heard some of these people when they call in and this answer given to them, they said, "You're crazy. I know this is not small airplanes. They hover in one spot for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
There's a video that was taken of this too. Some people may have seen
By
it.
Bob Poziolo.
And Lozanna's seen that, haven't
Yeah.
you?
I've seen that. It's a night video. You can see the lights moving on it, but you can't actually see any shape to it. You just see, you know, the formation of the lights, and it goes behind a tree, and when it comes back out, it's turned itself around behind the tree.
Many people know of Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who is an astronomer from Northwestern University in Chicago or Evanston, Illinois. And he, before he died, went there to Westchester County and talked with the people himself. And he has written the foreword in Night Siege about it. He has since died, but he believed this was really happening. And I think he even saw something when he was there, didn't he?
I don't recall.
Well, I remember that there were several of the investigators that did see it. So these things are happening right under our noses,
Right.
and many more that I can't talk about.
Well, I'd like to recommend Aileen's book to everyone, to get a good opportunity to really have an experience through your eyes and your meeting with other people who've had contacts and that. It'd be a good place to start. And I was wondering if you could each recommend another couple of books for people that.
There's so many.
There's so many, but I mean, say your favorites. What?
I think the most important books right now are The Intruders by Bud Hopkins. And even before that one, he wrote this other one years ago, but this one really applies to what happens with contacts, and that's Missing Time by Bud Hopkins. You can get it at the library, if you can't find it in a bookstore. And then the Communion by Whitley Strieber about his own contact.
And Night Siege by Phil Imbrogno and Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
And Light Years, again about Billy Meyer's
Billy
story.
Meyer's
That's
story.
by Gary Kinder.
Kinder. Yeah, right. And I also prefer Sky People. that gives you really a rundown of the whole concept of where we come from and
Right.
how we came about.
That's by Brinza the Portrait.
That's right, who happens to be a lord in the
Lord
Lords of...
Glencarty.
That's right in London.
And also,
he has set aside a room where he gathers various people to come and discuss UFOs.
I would also recommend the book Clear Intent by
Oh,
Larry
yes.
Fawcett,
That's very
which
good.
deals with the government's cover-up of this whole phenomena.
And that's the thing
Very
I
well
wasn't going to talk
documented.
about.
Very well documented.
I agree, because I remember the Operation Blue Book. That
Yeah.
they would find ways, to create the illusion that nothing happened.
No, but
they were
dropped
creating an
this.
illusion that
Yeah.
nothing existed when it really did.
They dropped that, actually. I really
Yeah,
don't
they
know
had to
why
drop
they
it, I
did
think.
drop that.
Well,
I guess it cost
It
money.
was part of the cover-up.
I know.
I would like to say that Wendell Stevens, that did the investigation on the Billy Myers case, has written many UFO contact from
Books,
a
yes.
series of books. He's written about 8, I believe, of different planets, these contacts, and they're very interesting.
Yeah, they are.
And people, they're not going to be able to find these in bookstores
No.
too easily.
They have to go to the States to get them. I don't think there are many Canadian books out, really. It usually comes from the States.
Well, the other thing is, California now has as many
Yeah.
people in California as there
Yes,
is in all of Canada.
That's
so
true. That's
Is that
very
right?
true.
yeah, we just heard that on
You're
the
right,
news
that's
a while
true.
ago.
So we can't compete.
Well,
John Maker from Duncan, BC, wrote a book, Aliens Above Us.
Yeah, that's
That was
true.
a very good book, too.
Yeah,
That's about
good.
2 years ago.
As a matter of fact, Dorothy Isaac is in that book, too. So that's...
Excuse me, Lozanna, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that in New York, if anybody does have trouble finding these books, they could get a hold of me through the UFO Contact Center International in Seattle, Washington, and I could put them in touch with book search firms who will find out-of-print and hard-to-find books.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
great.
the address is going to come up at the end of the program. And at the same time, I'd recommend everybody to get a hold of a copy of The Missing Link, because it's fascinating reading and it's
that's
I
current.
would, too.
Right? Well, I'd like to thank you all very much, and to say to everyone that we've been speaking with 3 very unique women who've gathered together here in Nelson this week to talk about UFOs and UFO Contact Center International. And it's Aileen Edwards from Seattle, Washington, and Lozanna Elwood from New York City, and Shirle Klein-Carsh from Surrey, BC. And it's been really fascinating talking with you, and I want to thank you all very much for coming.
Well, thank you for
And we
having me.
thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And good night, everyone.